Kim Cattrall joins me right here in Studio Q. Welcome.
Thank you.
So first of all, how surprising was it for you to recently learn you have a son who's the Prime Minister of Canada?
It's a very proud moment for me, my family, and my friends.
I understand you had some fun with that on Twitter.
How could you not?
Yeah.
Really.
That's awesome.
It was funny because I found out about it on Twitter, and I just thought it just made me laugh out loud. And I thought, well, how can I respond? I said, well, the equal humor, because in the interview on 60 Minutes, Trudeau was being asked, what would you like Americans, to know about Canadians? And of course he said, we'd like you to know us better. And then they show a picture of me as Margaret Trudeau. That's timing is everything.
The poetry is perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of humor, there's a lot of humor in this show. Sensitive Skin does a great job of balancing the serious with the comedy. Why is comedy such a useful tool for exploring the themes in this show?
Well, I've really learned a very valuable lesson being involved in Sex and the City, because I think that a lot of people, certainly before the show and maybe at the beginning of the show as it started to air and then get some kind of a following at the beginning, was it's really good to laugh at things you're scared of. I think it takes away the boogeyman kind of feeling of, this is too frightening. This is a can of worms. I'm never going to win. I'm never going to really get to the bottom of this. So let's really not talk about it. And this show, Sensitive Skin, was reflecting some of those feelings that I was having, not about sexuality, although, of course, like everyone else, I have issues. It was really kind of reflecting my views about aging and the fear that I had about it. And the biggest fear was that am I still vital? Do I still have something to say? And how will I say it? I mean, aging in my generation is considered a disease, and it's a place you have to eradicate it to be okay, to be beautiful, to be interesting, to be wanted. And that didn't sit well with me. So I wanted to open maybe a discussion at first. And then I saw this original series in England called Sensitive Skin, written by Hugo Blick, for a woman in her 60s, Joanna Lumley. And I thought, this feels right for me. That's a story that I want to tell. I feel very fortunate at this point in my career to make choices and to also get things done. I mean, the biggest fulfilling aspect of Sensitive Skin is that I got it made. It
took a while. It took 10 years.
I did, ultimately.
To get this made.
Yes.
So, while you can say you were fortunate and you get to make choices, at the same time, this was hard work.
It is. It is, even for people who can make choices. It's really hard work. Because first of all, it's a woman's story. And she's not young and nubile, So it's tricky. But there is a nakedness here. There is a vulnerability here. There is a character who's not self-assured. And that's what can happen, for most people does happen in middle age, is you start to wonder, who am I now? That's who I was in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s. But now in my 50s and my 60s and beyond, what have I achieved? And fortunately for me, a lot of the things on my list I have done. I've had an incredible career, and I'm very grateful for that. But these were more personal questions that kept coming. And I thought, how can I understand these? And if I played a character, how would I feel about her going through? So it was an exercise in understanding not just aging, but having empathy for myself and the questions that I was asking. So that to me, is a real sweet spot when you're tackling a role or a subject matter that is relevant right now for what you're going through, because it has the added advantage of the truth attached to it. And that's the mother lode.
You can bring some edge to it as a performer because it really is resonating. Is that what you mean?
It's edge, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
I have those questions. I look at myself in the mirror in those private moments, as we show Davina doing, which I've never seen on film before. I've seen beautiful women checking themselves out. I've never seen a middle-aged woman looking at her neck, unless, it's Nora Ephron who's making it funny and, again, accessible in her way. But I wanted people to sit with that and be comfortable with it and start to understand that there is a beauty in that in itself.
I want to give people some context before we continue this part of the conversation. You made this show because you were resonating with the emotional aspects of the lead character on the British original series. So where is Davina at emotionally at this point? Season 1 ends with quite a cliffhanger.
Yes, I don't want to give too much away.
I don't want to give too much away either. I just want to give
it?
some context for our listeners.
Well, what I like to bracket this way without, stepping on anybody's toe from the first episode of the second season. In the first series, we're talking about a 30-year relationship between a man and a woman. And something's going on for our protagonist, Davina Jackson, and she can't even really name it. But something's changed in the way she feels about her life, her husband, her future, her mother, her sister, her brother-in-law. All of these start to kind of just brew in her that something is amiss, but you don't really know what it is. And we use the device of delusions for characters outside of herself, which are really her talking back to herself. Mm-hmm. And again, not always saying or doing the right thing, leading her into trouble sometimes. For the second season, we wanted to really put Davina in the driver's seat of her own destiny. And she's single now. I won't explain why she's single, but she's single. So this is, we also had her move to Toronto Island so she could get a perspective, a visual perspective and an emotional perspective of what her whole life had been. Mm. So that's really fertile ground for all kinds of conflict and, again, self-inspection and observation and contemplation of where she's going to go next and what she's going to do. There's no roadmap to this. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's all kinds of psychotherapy and religions that have a lot of answers for many people, but everyone has to listen to their own way of dealing with mortality.
I want to pick up on a couple of things that you said. First of all, earlier you were talking about vulnerability of this character. You were talking about the truth, your own truth that you bring to this role. And it makes me wonder about the decision to put yourself in that vulnerable place. You could take on some safe roles, I'd imagine, if you wanted. Why take on a role that puts you in that vulnerable place?
Because that's the scariest place to be. And you don't know how it's going to work. And you don't have any answers. But in posing the questions, it might open up a way, an idea, some kind of thread to what will lead to ultimately what I think we're all striving for, which is fulfillment. A fulfillment of not just a dream, but a day-to-day life that gives you what you need. So that to me is, I don't ultimately feel like I'm putting myself on the line. If I wasn't doing it, I would letting myself off the hook.
Interesting.
So for me, when I take on a character, there's got to be a reason at this point in my life. I turned 60 this year, I've played a lot of young ingenues, and I've been the wife or the neighbor next door, and I've been the sexy, vamp, and I've done all of those things that have been incredibly fun and rewarding. But now is the time for me really to use my work and to use the medium of television to speak to an audience, to entertain them foremost, to entertain them, but also to leave them maybe with some questions that they themselves can start to even think about or answer. Because I think a lot of people are unconscious, like this character is at the beginning. She doesn't know what's going on. And the only examples that we have of that in film is almost women of this age being grotesque and, going through hot flashes and, being a cougar and being, sexual predator and all of these ridiculous scenarios, which are extremes. I mean, most women, that's not their reality. I mean, it certainly isn't mine. And it's. I wanted something that resounded in a very clear, truthful way in telling this story that it could cause a ripple. I think ultimately that's what I want to leave behind as a producer and as an actress is some kind of ripple of change, that people can look at something like female sexuality and be less frightened of it. It's not gender specific. And also to play a character who doesn't have the answers, because nobody really has any answers. Only you can ultimately, if you're listening to that voice inside of you, which is the ultimate thing that you have, which is your instincts. And when I saw this show on British television, my instinct said, that is a story that I want to tell because it's happening to me. And if it's happening to me, it might be happening to other people. And how can I tell that story and make it mine? That's why bringing it home to Canada is so important to me, and why Tirana is such an integral part of our series.
You brought up telling stories for people who are often unconscious, and you said Davina was unconscious as well. Mm-hmm. And you brought up these insightful delusions that act as a sort of device to help to bring her bring her some clarity. I think it's such an interesting problem, looking at what's really going on in your life. It sounds like the simplest thing, but it might be the hardest thing.
Yes.
Was that one of the things that resonated for you personally, where you actually related to the character?
Yes, that's what I wanted to tell. I wanted to tell the story like that. Not this woman is not a superwoman. She's had a nice life. She has a husband who loves her. She has a son who's really difficult to deal with, but she has a sister who's impossible. Those relationships between sisters are complicated, and there's the sister's husband. So we created this world, for her, and the only way that she could really accept what was going on in her head is to see, as you see in the first episode of the first season, is she's talking to herself and saying something's going on. And it's not just, a hot sweat. It's what is really going on here. I recently had a bout with insomnia, which really stopped me in my tracks. And there's really not much you can do without sleep. And I think that in smaller increments, that's what's happening for a lot of women. It's just manifesting itself slightly differently. And again, this is, for me, virgin territory. My mother has never really talked to me about this time in my life, because she would always, from her generation, say, well, we just got on with it. And you understood why that generation needed to. Mm. But my generation, the baby boomer generation, there's so many of us. And I want to charter these waters for me and hopefully for other women, because I'm trying to find out what's at the end of it. And I think this bout for insomnia for me had to do with my mortality, coming to terms with that. These are really heavy issues.
Big questions. Yeah,
they are big questions, but I think that they're important questions. And again, to use humor in dealing with them, and irony is really a great way to access it, and to not just open a conversation, but to get the audience to understand a real woman. When people talk to me about the show, what they really love about it is it feels real. Mm-hmm. They feel that these conversations are happening in real time. We don't have a setup joke. It's a dark comedy. People pass away in this comedy. It's much more, I think, honest. I like sitcoms. I like to laugh, but I also like to think. And I think what's given us, what we've been given in the last, say, 10, 15 years, is comedy that is multi-layered. And when you get that punch from a surprise, it takes your breath away. And you just don't know where it's going to go next. That, to me, it's drama and comedy, but ultimately it's really good storytelling. Mm. And I like to tell stories. That's always been a talent that I've had and enjoyed. So to make this a story about an unseen, not just unsung, but unseen heroine, and make her as human and as vulnerable and as real as possible, is really it's a great thrill and a great gift to be able to do it. I mean, it's not an easy sell to come into a room and say, I want to do a half-hour comedy about a woman going through a midlife crisis. What?
Which is why
is she going to be naked? She have a lot of sex with guys? I mean, this is kind of what you're up against. And the fact that I've been able to come home and do this is really extraordinary, really extraordinary.
It sounds like a lot of work you've been doing. You brought up your battle with insomnia that you've recently been open about. How did you come to terms with those fears around mortality?
Well, they're ongoing, aren't they? I think the biggest clue for me, I wrote an essay recently for BBC Radio 4 about my insomnia. And it had been coming on in fits and starts. And I was just so busy telling other people's stories, I wasn't really having enough time to do things for the heck of it, which I speak about in my essay. The heck of it is for no reason other than it might possibly just be fun.
Following instincts, as you said earlier.
Following instincts, but for no other purpose than just the now. Just kind of hanging out, whether you're just sitting and thinking or just really the value of wasting time. It's not wasted doing that. And sitting there, all these ideas, the idea for the essay came to me when I just kind of stopped and enjoyed whatever was right in front of me instead of doing things with purpose and with dedication and doing them to the best of my ability. And I've got a message and I do stop.
This like dutiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you're a doer.
I'm a doer.
I'm a doer.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't come from huge big cities or rich moms and dads that says, we're going to show you the world. We've made our way, and there's a lot of people out there who have done that. And you think, okay, now I have to change the speed here a little bit. I got to tune into a different frequency of just laying back and enjoying what I've built and seeing which mountains are worth climbing now. The house that I bought on Vancouver Island is a huge symbol in the positive side of the heck of it.
I've heard you talk about the pressure to be happy in society.
Drumbeat to be happy, yes.
Where do you think that comes from?
It comes mostly from advertising. If you buy this car, if you buy this hat, if you have this cologne, if you buy this bra, if you wear this cosmetic mask, it's all out there to sell you something, to give you happiness. And those things are great. They're fun, but they won't really last very long. So it's that's where I think the drumbeat is to buy, be happy. We've got the answers. The answers are rarely outside of yourself, if ever.
Does that place on Vancouver Island help you get away from that drumbeat?
Yes. I wake up and I hear the sea lions, wow, 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 and the eagles are, flying by. And, life it feels like this, it's a cycle, right? I was born in Liverpool, England, and I grew up on Vancouver Island, very poor. And my walks on the beach were everything to me. The logs on the beach and playing in those logs and having bonfires at night. And I was really happy. I really enjoyed it. I had a great childhood. And then I discovered that I enjoyed acting. And then it took me on this amazing odyssey. And now I've sort of come home in a way. Not full time, but enough for me to feel that I'm reconnecting to something that is such an integral part of who I was and who I am.
Sounds like an amazing stage of life. I mean, we've been talking about all the questions and all the challenges, but it sounds like an amazing stage of life.
I know, but so many people are fear-based about it, because the fear, I think, the greatest fear is that you will be alone. The greatest fear that we all have is that we will be alone. And, that's there's different ways of being alone. You can be alone in a forest, but there's a lot of stuff going on around you, so you're not completely alone.
Mm-hmm. There's also a kind of essential loneliness that I don't think you can ever get rid of. That's not necessarily bad.
No, I've spent a lot of time. I think what it is you can be alone, and it can be terrifying. And you can be alone and accept it and let go. And what comes and I'm still learning, as again, I'm a doer, is when you let go, there's something else that you get, which is a tremendous breath of comfort and looking around and appreciating what you do have instead of what you think you need.
Can you remember a moment where that lesson sort of dawned on you, or has that been kind of a gradual learning?
It's still happening as we speak in this very moment. Because, we have these tricky brains that won't let us stop. Just stop. And you can't yell. It's like you have to become your own patient parent in a way, and take yourself by the hand and just say, it's going to be fine. You don't have to run around right now. You can just relax.
As we've been discussing throughout your career in this role with Samantha on Sex and the City, you've pushed boundaries for female characters. What does it feel like to reflect on that?
To have an opportunity to do that is incredible. First of all, to get to have a job that you love doing is amazing. There's not very many people who can say that. And to have a career that's lasted over, oh my gosh, almost 50 years as a woman, that's tough to come by too. I think that my appetite for challenge is changing because I'm looking at time in a completely different way. It's finite, and that doesn't mean that my decisions and my choices are, but my time is. And I realized that with the passing of my father, because he had been in my life my whole life. And when he died, I realized that I could die too. It's not that I didn't intellectually know that. Of course I did. But when someone that close to you, and you're there at their bedside, and believe me, I've been in a lot of death scenes over my career, where the actor's pretending to be dead, but this is your flesh, your blood, and you see them pass, and the first thing you think is, I'm never going to experience that anymore. And you hold on to that, and you think, wow, I have to rethink my values here. But you don't do that immediately. I didn't anyway. I couldn't. I was too busy taking care of arrangements for his burial and being there for my family. But through the course of the next 4 years, it became apparent that I had not completely come to grips with my mortality. And the greatest gift that I found out is when I do die, I won't know that I'm dead, which is kind of most fantastic. Why the hell am I worrying about something that I will never know, And it could happen at any time. So I have to come to terms with that in some way.
Was your worry about that on a conscious level, or was it kind of unconscious, kind of causing a level of worry and anxiety that you couldn't really...
It was causing insomnia. Also, I was not making any time in any day, any given day, to just do nothing. And I needed to do that. I was unconsciously waking myself up because I wasn't providing time for myself, so myself was making time for me. And you think, how is that possible? That is like so destructive to what I need to do, which is so important. What's more important than giving yourself a nice 3 hours? So I was getting about 3 hours sleep, It's like, and then you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you think, what do I do now?
The brain is so interesting, eh?
The trick is to switch it off.
Yeah.
This is a hard thing to do.
I understand a third season of Sensitive Skin is already in the works.
Is it?
That's what I've been
I have
told.
no idea from your lips. I don't know. I have no idea.
Get ready for some more
Yes.
for some more doing. I was just going to ask you, what's it like going into uncharted territory, because the original British series ended after 2 seasons?
Well, we were given a tremendous blueprint for Sensitive Skin by Hugo Blick, who's really a brilliant writer. And he had originally, I found out recently, I thought he had written this for Joanna Lumley. He had written it originally for Julie Christie. And I thought, oh, wow, that actually makes more sense to me than Joanna. So I really, I don't know, I think that Sensitive Skin in so many ways has given these collaborators with me as the protagonist an opportunity to not just not make it our own, but make it significant for now. Because I think when Hugo wrote it, it was in 2005 and 2006. And in this 10-year gap, we've really come much further than we ever had.
It's wild.
Yes, in that space of time. So I think that actually this timing, and with this story in North America, with the collaboration and also making it specifically Canadian, has given it even more of a voice.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I could talk to you for a lot longer, but unfortunately, we got to wrap up. So,
Thanks so
thank
much.
you.